Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Diane Bérard. I'm an independent solutions journalist, and I have been invited by BDC to host this great event. It is a pleasure for me to host this Economic Outlook event, specially designed for this year's Small Business Week. The topic on everyone's mind, naturally, is the future of our economy and its impact on businesses like yours. Before we start, I would like to get over some housekeeping rules to make sure we all have a smooth experience today. If you have not already done so, please locate the Q&A box on your screen. This is where you can ask questions and write to our technical team if needed. This event will be hosted in English. We have hosted the French version today at 10 a.m., and the recording will be available on BDC's Small Business Week website. Our guest today is BDC's Vice President and Chief Economist, Pierre Cléroux. Good morning, Pierre.
Good morning.
During his 25-year career, Pierre has made it his mission to analyze major economic trends and translate them into actionable strategies for people like you, business owners. Thank you for joining us, Pierre. We have 45 minutes for this session. To kick off, Pierre will take a few minutes to give us an overview of the economic situation. He will also speak about some major trends reshaping our realities and what they mean for business owners. Get your questions ready because after Pierre's presentation, we will jump right into the Q&A session. Pierre, can you walk us through what we need to know about the current economy and its impact on business and business owners?
Yes, I'm going to do this in first of all, good morning, everybody. Good day for those who are on the East Coast. I'm going to first talk about where the economy is going for the next 2 years. And second, I'm going to talk about how our business environment has been changing because of the pandemic. So let's first talk about the Canadian economy. Here you see the GDP per quarter. You can see that in 2020, we had a huge decline during the second quarter. The economy, the recovery has been very strong. But what surprised us is the last quarter of 2021 that we have, the second quarter, we have a slight negative growth. We were surprised by that because we thought we'll have a more positive growth during the year. But I'm going to explain in the next few minutes that we are still very optimistic. We believe the third and the fourth quarter of 2021 are going to be quite positive, and we're going to have solid growth in 2022. In terms of the good news, in terms of the job, is we have recuperated all the job loss during the pandemic. We lost in Canada 3 million jobs, but in September 2021, we have reached the same level of job than we had before the pandemic. What is interesting that you can see on the graph is during each wave, we're losing jobs because of the restriction we impose on the economy, which is not the case right now. We are in the middle of the fourth wave, but actually the level of job in Canada is still increasing. And the reason is probably the fact that our vaccination level has been very strong in Canada. 72% of all Canadians has been fully vaccinated. This is the highest level among developed economies compared to Italy, France, United Kingdom, Germany, or the United States. So the fact that our level of vaccination is very high, it protects our economy during the fourth wave. So what is going to drive the economy for the next 2 years? Well, there's three elements or three factors. The first one is consumer, and probably the most important one. The good news is Canadians' wealth has been increasing over the last 12 months. We are richer today than we were, and there's three reasons for that. First, our revenue has been increasing because of government program. Also, the housing market has been performing very well. So if you own a house, you're probably richer today than 12 months ago. And finally, Canadian investment has been growing. So the result is all Canadians, if we take all Canadians, we're richer, our wealth has been increasing. On top of it, we have saved quite a bit of money last year. Every year, we save about $18 billion as Canadians. Last year, we saved more than $200 billion. Of course, there was a lot of restriction on the economy, so it was a good reason to stay home and save money, but also because of the uncertainty. During each recession, we save a little bit of money. But last year was definitely a record. This is a good news for the economy. It means that Canadians have money in their pocket and also in their bank account, and they're going to spend it. We already see that consumption of goods has been increasing in Canada. They are 4.5% higher than before the pandemic. The housing market has been performing extremely well. We had a record number of sales last year. The market is slowing down, but the volume is still higher than before the pandemic. So the first reason to be optimistic for the next 2 years is coming from consumers. They are going to drive our economy. Second reason is on the business side. 76% of Canadian businesses are profitable today, which is a much better number than only a few months ago. It's not easy though. 29% are saying they are profitable, but they are still struggling because of COVID-19. So despite the fact that the demand is strong and most businesses are doing better, we still have a lot of issues: shortage of labor, value chain or supply chain disruption, price volatility. So it's difficult to manage a business today. But the good news is we are going in the right direction. And as we are moving away from the pandemic, these issues should actually improve. Business investment.
I have a question looking at your slide. What is the challenge that entrepreneurs right now systematically underestimate?
I think it's the shortage of labor. I think we have an aging population in Canada. As a result, it's difficult to recruit people across the country. And unfortunately, a lot of people believe it's a temporary problem, but it's going to be a long-term problem because our aging population, in the next 5 years, millions of Canadians are going to retire. So that's probably the most important challenge for business in the next 5 to 10 years.
That's it. We're reading about a decade issue, that this could be the issue for the next decade.
Definitely, and we'll talk about it a bit later because it's, like I said, I think it's the most important challenge that we're going to face now that we're moving away from the pandemic.
Thank you.
Business investment are increasing, but as you can see from this graph, they're not back to the pre-crisis level, which reflect the fact that it's still difficult to do business. But the good news, if you look, there's a lot of numbers on this slide, but if you look on the red part, this is the number for business investment in technology. And the good news is technology investment are actually higher today than before the pandemic. And finally, the other good news is our exports are back to the pre-crisis level. We export a lot to the US, and the US economy is performing very well. Actually, the US economy is already back in terms of level of economic activities to the pre-crisis level, and our exporters are benefiting from that. So we expect a forecast this year for 5.2% growth for the Canadian economy and a very solid growth for 4% for 2022. So despite the fact that we still have some issues with the supply chain, with shortage of labor, the economy is growing and the demand will remain strong for the next 2 years. The next part of the presentation is about how our business environment is changing. And the first trend that we see is what we just talked about, is the fact that we have more and more difficulties to recruit people. This is not a new problem, but the pandemic has made this problem even worse. But the fundamental issue for the difficulty to recruit people is the fact that we have an aging population. The median age in Canada was only 26 years old in 1971. We had a very young population. Now it's over 40 years old, and it will peak in a few years at 44 years old. So as a result, many baby boomers, many Canadians are retiring. Actually, in the next 5 years, it's millions of Canadians who are going to retire. And there's not enough young people joining the workforce. As a result, we have a gap building between the supply that you see in red, which represent the number of Canadians between 15 and 64 years old, and the demand, the level of job. So there's a good news here. There's more job for more Canadians. A lot of Canadians are able to find a job, even if they don't have a lot of skills. But the bad news is for business. It's getting more and more difficult to recruit. And unfortunately, This is not going to be solved in a few months. We can see from our forecast, this gap is going to be with us for probably another decade. So this is a long-term issue, and we need long-term solutions. We just released a new report on shortage of labor, a report that you can have access at bdc.ca. And we look at more than 1,000 companies in Canada. We look at their strategies, and especially we look at what works the best. And often it's not the strategy that is the most used, but it's really in terms of business growth, revenue growth, the number one is to invest in technology and in automation. In a context where it's more and more difficult and more expensive to hire people, investing in technology to replace some tasks inside your business, it's one of the best solutions you can take. Of course, it's not possible for everything. You cannot replace your truck driver by a robot, at least not for now. But it's possible for many tasks in your business. Second is to use a more formal hiring process. In our research, we were surprised to see that 75% of small business owners, they recruit themselves towards their network. Well, maybe that was a strategy that was working in the past, but in this war for talent, it's much more difficult to do that. So you need to advertise on social media where the young generation is looking for jobs. You need to be more formal, have a job description to explain better the quality of your business. So you have to sell your business as a good employer. I know we are more used to sell our products or to market our products and services, but we have to market our business as an employer now. The third solution is to offer a total compensation package that is competitive. Total compensation package is much more than just the salary. It includes benefits, flexible hours that you can offer. So you have to work on your compensation package to make sure that your business is attractive. And finally, one that is very important is to expand your hiring pool that you're looking at. The job market has changed. It's much more difficult now to recruit people with experience. But there's still some group of Canadians who have more difficulties to find a job. That's the case of young people who are just out of school. That's the case of older people who are over 65, but they would like to continue to work. And that's the case for immigrants. The unemployment rate for immigrants is still much higher in Canada than it is for people born here. So as the job market is changing, it's important to change our vision of the job market. It's important to change our strategy. The second trend that we see is e-commerce. E-commerce is not a new trend, but the pandemic has really changed the game here. The volume of e-commerce has tripled during the pandemic, and it's still very elevated. It's not going back to the pre-crisis level. It's going to continue to be very important and very strong. So it's important to have a strong presence online. The third trend is the remote work. At the beginning of the pandemic, 40% of Canadians work from home. Now it's about 25%, but we are not going to go back to the pre-crisis level for two reasons. First, on the business side, businesses are much more open to this concept. They are much more welcoming this. Actually, according to our research, 74% of all Canadian businesses believe they're going to have some remote work arrangement after this crisis. And of course, on the Canadian side, people like to work from home at least a few days a week. 54% of Canadians are saying that it's going to be important for them that they have the ability to work from home before they move to another job or before they accept a new job. So the new equilibrium is going to be different. Much more people are going to work from home after this crisis. Finally, the last trend that I want to talk is the fact that the climate emergency, the climate change is becoming very important. According to our research, 20% of Canadians are considered as leaders. So that means they take some specific action to reduce their impact on the environment. They even measure the impact on the environment of their business. 54% are in transition. So that means that they have taken some steps. For example, reduce their energy consumption, reducing waste. But they still have some way to go. And finally, 26% are just at the beginning of this process. I think everybody will agree that it's important for Canadians and Canadian businesses to do everything they can to protect the environment. But also there's going to be much more pressure in the next few years in terms of the environment. The government program are going to put a price on carbon emission, and this price is going to increase over time. So it's going to be important for businesses to prepare and to reduce their impact on the environment. Also, we believe consumers and also large corporations, they would put pressure on smaller business to make sure that they participate to this effort. So in conclusion, the economic growth for the next few years is going to be solid. We're not done with the pandemic yet. We still have some issues, shortage of labor, difficulties with the supply chain, and also prices are changing very rapidly. But we're moving in the right direction, and we believe that the demand for our products and services in terms of business is going to continue to increase. However, the pandemic has changed our business environment. We're going to have to use much more technology than in the past. The online business is still very strong. More people want to work from home, so teleworking is here to stay. And the labor shortage is one of the solutions is to invest in technology. And of course, you know, it's time to take action to reduce our carbon footprint as we're moving into that direction. This is going to be an important trend for the next few years.
Thank you, Pierre. I hope that everyone watching this found this as helpful as I did. These are really important changes that our society is going through. Now, let's start answering some of the questions we've received. First, let me remind you of some of the housekeeping rules I shared earlier. Because our goal is to answer the most questions possible, we thank you in advance for being concise and precise when asking your questions around Pierre's presentation. To submit your question, just click on the Q&A panel and type your question. While we are waiting for questions to come, I will start with some questions of my own. What are the main risks for the economy right now, Pierre?
One of the risks that economists are really watching for is inflation. Inflation has been increasing. It's 4.1% now, much higher than what we used to see in Canada, around 2%. Part of it is temporary because of the change in the economy during the pandemic. For example, people bought a lot of more lumber because they did renovation, because the housing market is really hot. So in that case, the price of lumber has been increasing. But as we're moving away from that, well, the price of lumber is going down. So part of the inflation is because of temporary change in the economy. What we're worried about is salaries are increasing in Canada, and this will have a more permanent impact on the inflation. So it's important that we keep inflation down because we want to keep our interest rate down as long as we can. So far, we're still pretty optimistic. We don't believe interest rates are going to increase before the next 12 or 14 months, but that's something that we really watch for.
That's interesting because every economic issue we discuss right now brings us back to labor shortage. You're talking about inflation, but one big part of it is the salary. And why are salary raising? Because of the labor shortage. So that's an element we can't underestimate, that labor shortage is part of all these economic issues. It has an influence on all the economic issues right now.
Definitely, and we believe that shortage of labor is going to become the most important issue for business in the next 5 to 10 years.
So it has to be included in every strategic decision of the entrepreneur. Be on top of the mind that there is a labor shortage and it influences decisions.
Yes, you're right, and we believe, like in the last 30 years, we had a lot of people entering the workforce. Remember, like 30 years ago, the baby boomers were young, they were entering the workforce.
So that was a dream for
That was a dream,
entrepreneurs.
and the bad news was the unemployment rate was high. Now, these people are leaving to retire, and the new generation is much smaller, so we don't have enough people to compensate for that. So we have to change our mindset about hiring people, about the labor force. We have to think differently.
Allocation of resources, allocation of my money. I will have to raise salaries, so that means I will have to be more efficient somewhere else.
Definitely, and that's the reason why investing in technology is one of the solutions. Because, you know, in terms of business, it's a balancing between employees and capital. And if the price of the salaries are increasing, well, it becomes more advantageous to invest in technology.
And innovation.
In innovation.
So now let's go with the first question. So I will ask my partners to push me the first question. You can bring it on. We're ready for you. Well, while waiting for the question, we can discuss more. What about supply? Should entrepreneur worry? Because there was these days where we said entrepreneurs should go with just in time, don't accumulate, don't overstock. But now there's this worrying about, should I stock? Should I be worried about the supply?
The pandemic has really an impact on supply chain around the world and also the price of transportation. So things have been very bumpy over the last 12 or 18 months. Actually, it's taken longer to solve than what we expected at the beginning. For example, there's a shortage of chip, and it's really slowing down the production of automobile in Canada. So we didn't expect that. So we have to be very careful. We have to stock a little bit more depending on the product you're buying. Maybe look for other suppliers in other countries if it's difficult to get what you want.
Closer countries?
Closer countries as well. Maybe looking at if it's possible to produce in Canada what you're looking for. So definitely for the next 12 months, we believe that it's going to go away as we move away from the pandemic. But for now, it's still difficult, and we have to look at very different options.
Different mindset about just in time for that. So let's look at what our participants are interested in. What is the forecast of the U.S. for the U.S. economy for 2022, 2023?
Yeah, it's very good actually. The U.S. economy is the economy that is performing the best among developed economies. So far, the growth this year is going to be very strong. Like I said, it's the only country who has been back to the pre-crisis level in terms of economic activities. Like in Canada, we are at 98.5, so we're close, but the US is over 100%. So the US economy is performing well, and will continue to perform well. The interest rates are low, the demand from consumer is strong, so they are performing very well, and we believe that just like in Canada, consumers are going to drive the growth in the US, and we are optimistic about the next few years.
I see. What sectors do you anticipate will recover the fastest out of the pandemic? And as opposite, I would add another part to the question, what sectors might lag?
Yeah, actually some sectors were not affected. Financial services, professional services, technology, everything related to tech, like people who provide technology services. The recession was a few days, I would say. So they didn't suffer last year. Of course, they had to work from home and everything, but they did very well. Manufacturing was pretty quick to recovery as well. Agriculture was very strong, very quickly. The demand for agriculture was very strong. The sectors that are more struggling are everything related to tourism. So accommodation, food services like restaurant, shows and art. It's more difficult, and it's still difficult, I would say, across the country, even if most of the restrictions are gone. Tourism is not back, especially from outside the country. So these sectors are having difficulties, but there's a lot of sectors who have fully recovered. In provincial services, there's thousands more jobs today than before the pandemic.
Now we have this famous question that comes on top of mind of most people. The impact of the Canada's COVID-related financial assistance program and their potential renewal for a long time or for a while. Because there have been people having this idea that the labor shortage is due to these programs. So how do you see the impact of these financial assistance programs?
Well, I think these programs were very useful because the impact was huge on Canadians. 3 million Canadians lost their job. So I think we needed these programs to help Canadians to go through this crisis. Now, as the recovery is very strong and there's a shortage of labor, I think these programs are not as necessary. Maybe in some sectors, but in general, I think we're moving away from this recession. So I wouldn't change. I think it was very important at the beginning. We're not the only country who did that. The U.S., introduced a lot of money to help Americans, And in Canada, we did the same, and I think it was necessary at that time.
But what message should we give the entrepreneurs who seem to think that these programs are the reason why they can't hire?
Well, you have to remember that before the pandemic, before all this started, we had the shortage of labor. The unemployment rate in Canada was the lowest in 40 years. So the fundamentals of the shortage of labor is related to aging population, the fact that we are getting older, and as a result, many Canadians are retiring. So the programs are temporary, and that doesn't change the game.
So the end of the program doesn't mean the end of the problem to recruit.
No, and it's very important to understand that the shortage of labor is not a short-term issue. It's an issue that is going to be with us, unfortunately, for the next 10 years. So we have to look at long-term solutions, because if we look only at short-term solutions, it's not going to work. In the next 6 months, it's going to be as difficult to recruit as it is today. So this is very important to understand. Every business have to evaluate what they need to grow, what is the best solution for them in terms of recruiting people in the next 5 to 10 years, because the issue is going to stay with us.
This is a very important message, Pierre. When do you anticipate that the global supply chain will resolve itself? We are talking about factory output and logistical backing for North America.
That's a very good question. We think it's going to take a bit longer than we thought, probably another 8 to 12 months. We were surprised by the difficulties of supply chain and the extent of what it is. Like I said, for example, the chip shortage is really having a huge impact on the automotive industry in Canada. So unfortunately, these issues are difficult to solve. So we believe it's going to take another 8 to 12 months before we go back to normal, to the pre-crisis level.
All the issues are linked. We're talking. You have mentioned the chips shortage twice, but I've been told that the chip shortage is a water-related issue. It's a climate crisis issue. So the chip shortage is related to the fact that where the chips are being made, there was a water issue, and it takes up to 6 Olympic pools of water to make the chips during a day. So if there's a climate crisis, there's a water issue, there's a chip shortage. So all the issues at some point become linked.
Definitely, and all these issues are linked, yeah.
So we have a participant from the travel industry who is worried. He says, travel industry was hit hard, and still very slow growth during your research. Did you find any reason to be optimistic, and in what future?
Yeah. Well, you're perfectly right. It's the sector that is going to take the longest to go back to normal because of the restrictions that Canada and other countries are putting on traveling. This situation is going to come back to normal. It's going to take some time, probably another 12 months. The good news is Canadians, Americans have a lot of money. They save a lot of money during the pandemic. So I'm sure that when it's possible to travel more and when the restrictions are totally gone, this sector is really going to recover. But it's going to take probably another year before we see things going back to normal.
Now back to the labor issue. What do you think that may be the impact of immigration? Because we have raised this solution, immigration as a solution to labor shortage. So how serious of a solution can it be? And what skills would be relevant from those immigrants?
Well, immigration is very important. And one of the reasons why we have this shortage of labor right now, which is worse than ever, is because of lack of immigration over the last 2 years. Because of COVID-19, the level of immigration dropped by half in Canada. We calculated we're missing about 400,000 people in Canada because of the restriction during COVID. So of course, this immigration is going to come back next year, and this is going to be part of the solution. It's not going to be enough to solve the issue because too many people are retiring, but it's definitely part of the solution. In terms of skills, what I see across the country, a lot of cities are going abroad and they are looking for specific skills. So what they do is they talk to their businesses inside their cities, and they are evaluating estimating which trade or which profession they need, and they recruit outside the country people who can meet these requirements. So that's basically the best way to do it, because you make sure that when somebody is moving here, they already have a job and they have the right skill for that job. But definitely immigration is part of the solution, but it's not the only solution.
We have a very interesting question concerning consumer behavior. Do you believe, Pierre, that the consumer has changed its purchasing habit significantly toward goods as opposed to service? And do you think that is a longer trend due to the pandemic lockdown? Naturally, we could not consume service, we were locked down.
Yes.
So this habit, do you think it will stay?
Well, this is a good question, and this person is perfectly right. We saw a shift, and people buy a lot of goods, and they decided to renovate their house and everything. It's going to come back to normal, because there was a lot of restriction, especially on personal services. So as the restrictions are gone and lifted in most part of the country, we're going to increase the level of service that we buy. And probably this is going to slow down the purchase of goods. But the good news is the total consumption is increasing. And like I explained before, consumers have money in their pocket. So we believe that total consumption will continue to increase.
Is it a lasting effect? I mean, this money that we accumulated during the pandemic, I mean, I saw on one of your slides that it's less now. So is this effect going to last?
No, I don't think so. I think it's exceptional.
Yeah.
Like I said, if we look back, Canadians save about 20 billion every year. Last year, we saved 200 billion. That's 10 times. We'll probably go back to normal after a few years.
So that's for next few years only.
Exactly. This question of restrictions, we couldn't go to restaurants, we couldn't travel, etc. Also uncertainty. During every recession, we see that the level of people who save, the level of saving is increasing. So now, you know, as we move away from this crisis, I think Canadians would just go back to...
so that was a human reaction to a crisis. Now we have a question that was expected about oil and gas prices. So how do you think rising oil and gas prices are going to affect the economy and the inputs? And this rise of the prices, is it temporary?
I think it's going to stay with us for a while. There's a transition, there's an energy transition around the world. For example, China is not buying as much coal as before. They want to reduce their consumption of coal, and they replace it by natural gas. So the price of natural gas has just exploded, basically. And also the price of oil is supported by this transition. So for the next few years, we expect the price of oil and natural gas is going to stay high, which is going to benefit our provinces who produce oil and natural gas, like Alberta, BC, Saskatchewan, and Newfoundland. So these provinces in the next few years are going to benefit from that. So it's going to stay elevated for a while as the transition is happening in terms of new energy.
We have a participant that would like you to go more granular with your economic statistic and go regional, so Eastern Canada, Quebec, Ontario, and Western Canada. Can you be more granular, Pierre, about the outlook?
Yes, definitely. You know, actually, across the country, all the provinces are doing better. The province that is performing the most is British Columbia.
Okay.
They are not only back to the pre-crisis level in terms of jobs, but they are at 102%. So they have more jobs today than before the crisis.
How do we explain that?
Well, lumber is a big part of the BC economy, and lumber has been very strong. The manufacturing sector in general, not only lumber, has been performing well. BC, especially Vancouver, has a strong tech sector, which is performing extremely well. So this is compensating for the fact that tourism is not performing as well as before. But it was very interesting, the level of sales for restaurants is actually back to the pre-crisis level. That's the only place in Canada.
Oh.
So people obviously in BC are back to restaurant. The next provinces, Alberta and Saskatchewan, I'm going to put them together because they are oil-producing provinces. The situation has been more difficult during the pandemic because of the oil price went down, but actually oil price is back, and it's the highest level over the last 10 years. So the next few years are going to be very strong. The Alberta economy is going to grow over 5% next year, which is probably one of the best growth in the country. Saskatchewan is going to benefit from that. The agriculture sector is strong. There was a drought last year, so it was a bit more difficult. But the demand for Canadian food and Canadian agriculture has been very strong and will continue to be strong. So Saskatchewan will be helped by that. Manitoba is the most diversified economy in the country, and the recovery has been strong. Manufacturing sector is back, is actually doing very well. So Manitoba has continued to do well. Ontario is just like the average in Canada. It's back to the pre-crisis level. Ontario is performing well. The manufacturing sector is performing very well, except for automotive. Not because the demand for automotive is not well, it's actually just because of the supply chain issues. We were talking about the chip. So there's a setback right now, but as this problem is solved, automotive is going to really be strong and the Ontario economy is going to be strong. For Quebec, the economy is back to the pre-crisis level. There's a very diversified manufacturing sector here in Quebec, and this is really helping the growth. Construction is strong, the housing market is very strong, so the economy is going to experience a positive growth. We didn't have in Quebec a setback in terms of the second quarter, so the economy will continue to be solid. In the east part of the country, the economy is almost back to the pre-crisis level. Tourism, which is very important for the Atlantic provinces, has been very declining, as we know. So this is affecting most provinces. But there's some very positive numbers in manufacturing, in technology as well. So these provinces are going to have positive growth this year and also in 2022.
Thank you. That was very clear. So how do you think inflation will affect home prices, another big challenge, and will this lead to a bubble? I think we're already in a bubble, aren't we?
Well, the price has been increasing very significantly across the country. What we are seeing now is, the reason is interest rate went down. And despite the fact that our disposable income has increased, so people had money, interest rates were down, there was a pandemic, people stay home, they wanted to buy bigger home, so there was a strong demand for housing, and as a result, the prices went up. Now we're really seeing a slowdown. So in terms of sales, it's slowing down, and prices is not increasing as much. So for 2022, we believe that the market is going to go back to more a normal pace. So we won't see the price increase that we have been seeing over the last 12 months. We believe price is going to stay elevated because Canada is going to accelerate immigration. So when we bring people from outside, they need a place to stay. Maybe they won't buy a house, but they will rent somewhere, and that increased the demand for housing. So we believe for the next few years, the market is going to be good. Not as good as the last 12 months. You cannot increase by 35% every year, but it's not going to, prices are not going to go down. And the market is going to be quite solid for the next few years.
Now we have a question about technology, because earlier we said how important automation and technology, how critical it is. What advice could you provide to SMEs, especially in the service industry regarding technology? Because it's such a natural for the manufacturing sector, but what about service? Where to start?
Well, technology has really improved and evolved. So it's almost possible to find a technology for every type of business to help you. Maybe it's a management system, maybe it's an accounting management system, maybe it's a ERP for managing your clients. So despite, we often think when we talk about automation about the manufacturing sector, but technology has really evolved, and now it's possible to invest in technology to replace some tasks inside your business, to give you some breathing in terms of hiring people. It's almost possible to do that in every sector. So you have to look at how, I know that, for example, accounting firm, they have now software to help them to do what they do. Even lawyers have software to help them. So it's possible to find technology that will help you. The idea is to have the right strategy for what you want to do and to replace some tasks to free up some of your people. So technology is often good to replace something that you do over and over again, to repeat tasks. So if you using technology to do that, while your people, your employees will be free to do something else. So it's very different from for each business, for each sector, depending on your business model. But definitely, technology is much more powerful than before and easier to use and also cheaper than used to be.
Now we have two participants that are worried about telework, that are questioning themselves about telework. So is there a connection between low productivity and telework? This entrepreneur says, I have a problem gauging my productivity, the productivity of my remote workers.
This is a great question. There was a lot of worry before the pandemic about the productivity or efficiency of people working from home. During the pandemic, many businesses were forced to do that, and they invested in technology. And we did a study, and we asked businesses across the country, what is your experience with teleworking? Only 6% said that efficiency was lower. 94% said that they didn't see any change in efficiency or was actually better. So again, it depends on your business model, but teleworking has been proven over the last 18 months that it's very efficient for many businesses. And on top of it, usually employees like it. It's easier for them. It's easier to have a work-life balance. So it's a lot of people want that, and actually it's a criteria for them to have their job or to stay in the job. So it's very important to investigate if it's possible. It's not always possible. You know, you cannot ask a truck driver to work from home. In manufacturing, for example, it's not, if you work on the production line, you cannot do that. But for many jobs, it's possible to have a mix, maybe not 5 days a week. But what we are going to see is a lot of mix, like 2 days a week from home, 3 days a week from the office. By the way, and I'm going to conclude on that, 20% of our businesses are saying that they are going to reduce their workplace, their space that they rent or they own, because of remote work. So there's some benefits for businesses as well.
Now, I will ask you, Pierre, to do some magic. This participant wants you to predict when the office return will happen, 2022, 2023, and what does it mean exactly, the office return? You said earlier 2 days, 3 days, 3 days, 2 days, so it's really a hybrid return, but when?
Well, I think the beginning of 2022, I think it's going to happen for most businesses. I think it's going to happen there. I think it's going to be hybrid. I don't think we'll go back to the old model. I think we're going to have more teleworking or remote work at the end of this pandemic than we had before. It's not going to be the same for every business, but a lot of businesses are going to try to accommodate their people. So I think we're going to have a hybrid model. I was talking to clients in Ontario, the manufacturers, and the owner was saying that before the pandemic, they had 0 people working from home. During the worst part of the pandemic, 60% of his employee was working from home. The 40% was the production line, but everybody else was working from home. And he said, you know, I don't know what will be the end of it, but I'm sure we won't go back to 0. It's going to be somewhere in the middle.
The message is clear. Now, let's go back to reshoring. What reshoring trends do you see, and how serious could we take this reshoring trend?
Well, we actually did a study on that because we remember at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot of question about the difficulties in China. So we thought that there would be a lot of reshoring. Actually, nothing happened. A year later, the level of import from outside the country is the same than it was before. So we know some businesses are shopping around. They try to move from China as a supplier to Mexico, for example. But in terms of bringing back the production in Canada, So far, it's not happening. We believe there's a lot of potential for that because it's getting more complicated to import from China, for example. It's getting more costly. The pandemic have changed this cost structure in some countries. China is one of them. So I think there's potential there. I think it's important for business to revisit the way they have their supply chain. But so far, the numbers are showing there's no major trend.
Now, very interesting question. What do you think economic implication of inequality of global vaccination distribution schedule? What's the impact? The fact that there's an uneven distribution of the vaccine, what impact on the economic outlook?
Well, the impact is it's going to delay the global recovery. In Canada, the recovery has been very strong, but we still have issues. One of the issues is the supply chain. And one of the problems with that is some countries, the level of vaccination is low, and there's a lot of disruption. Some manufacturing plants are forced to close for a month because there's a lot of cases of COVID-19. So actually the fact that we are not equal around the world is going to take more time for the recovery. It's going to postpone the recovery in some countries. So even here, we're going to feel it towards our value chain.
Yes. So we should celebrate the fact that Canadians are highly vaccinated, but we should take the fact that other countries are not. So that's an issue. It has an impact on us.
Definitely. It's a case that everybody would benefit if everybody would be vaccinated around the world.
And the economy would benefit.
Yeah.
So do you expect the Bank of Canada to raise interest rates much earlier than anticipated?
I'm going to jump into the water and say no. Inflation is a bit higher than expected, and it's going to stay higher than we thought. But I think the Bank of Canada is going to be very tolerant for higher inflation because this situation is quite special. So I don't think they are going to increase interest rate before another 12 months. They're going to wait until the economy is going back to normal and we're running at full capacity. And we expect this will happen probably in 12 months. So I might be wrong, but I don't think interest rate will increase. After that, when we're back to the full capacity and we're going back to normal, well, interest rates are going to increase slowly until they reach what we call a neutral zone, where the interest rates are not stimulating the economy, but they are not also limiting the economy. So in Canada, it's estimated around 2.5%. So we don't believe interest rates are going to increase before a year. After that, you should expect some increase slowly. And in 3-4 years, we should be back around that 2.53%.
We talked earlier about residential real estate. Let's talk about commercial real estate. This participant is wondering, as people are moving to work remotely, how do you think this will impact commercial real estate?
Well, what we are seeing now is retail space in large cities like Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal. It's a more difficult market. I think it's going to come back, but it's going to take some time before the downtown areas are vibrant like they used to be. Also, what we see is there's a strong demand for warehousing. We are moving much more on the online business, and to do online business, you need more warehouse space. So already, and this is a trend that we have been seeing for the last year, the price and the demand for warehousing in large cities is really increasing. And as we are moving towards more e-commerce, we're going to see that.
We have a question about opportunity. There are many new economy opportunities, like, for example, gigafactory battery production. Is Canada moving fast enough in that direction to seize those opportunities?
It's difficult to judge, especially that we're beside a country, a big country that is really good at innovating, the US. So we are moving into that direction. I think we're going the right pace. What is helping Canada is we have a very solid labor force. We have a shortage of labor, but people are well educated in Canada. They can use technology in their work much more than even the US.
Okay.
You know, our level of education in Canada, in average, is very high, one of the highest in the world.
And our technology literacy also?
Exactly,
Oh.
yeah, much more than the US, for example.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And that is very helping because it's helping businesses to innovate and to be able to use technology. So in that sense, I think we are in the right place. And frankly, this is the future for Canada. We are not going to have a big labor force in the next 10 years. So we need to focus on value-added products, on technology, because we cannot produce mass production. This is not going to be our future.
Now we have a question about our competitivity. So what's your insight about Canadian business strength globally? How to rise our competitive ability?
Well, the key is actually our level of productivity. And our level of productivity is lower than in the US. And when we compare ourselves with the OECD, so the developed economies, we're right in the middle. We're not the champion. And I'm going to take a minute to describe productivity, because sometimes people believe productivity is to make people work more, which is not the case. Productivity is the output you produce with the number of employees you have. So you can increase productivity if you give the better tools to your employees. I'll give you a specific example. Let's say you start a pizza restaurant, and you ask your person who delivers pizza. You're just starting. You don't have a car, so this person is delivering pizza downtown, the core downtown, but by foot. So his ability to deliver pizza is going to be able to deliver 5 or 6 or 10 pizza during the day. If you buy this person a car, is going to be able to deliver much more pizza. So your productivity is increasing, not because this guy is working more, just because he has a better tool. So this is the definition of productivity. This is our challenge. We have to increase our level of productivity. The US is much better than us. And in order to do that, you have to look at how you make things, even services. How do you deliver it? And see how you can improve on that. Sometimes it's investing in equipment, in technology, in training, but to find ways to produce what you produce with less effort, less resources. And it's becoming even more important than before because we have a shortage of labor. We're not going to hire the people we need. So we need to be more efficient. We need to be more productive.
Like we said earlier, labor shortage has to be on top of mind of all the business decisions right now. Now we have one participant who's worried. That person says that there's a labor shortage, but how seriously is the impact of mandatory COVID vaccination for employee recruitment? Is it a big impact? Do you think this is something to be worried about, or do you think it is marginal?
Well, it's going to cause some issues, I'm sure. Some provinces have an obligation for healthcare workers, so I'm sure it's going to disrupt some of the services. But it's a decision that, frankly, I'm supporting because I believe that vaccination is the key to get out of this pandemic. So I think that's really the #1 issue that we should focus on. But there's no doubt that in some government services, it's going to be an issue in the short term. In the long term, I think everything will be fine.
Now let's stick with the employment and let's go granular with labor. This participant wants to know about growth projection, but in different part of the labor population. So we're talking low income, we're talking technical, and we're talking management. I was reading recently that there starts to be a management shortage. As baby boomers are going into retirement, it seems like it's not that easy to find bosses.
And it's true because people who are leaving to retire, they are in different part of the organization. So I think it's going to be a problem for every skill, right? Of course, people working in tech, it's even more a problem because the demand for tech services is very high. But beside that, I know companies who are in manufacturing, or they could hire 200 people tomorrow, even more. So it's an issue that is going to be difficult for every sector, every type of work. It's even worse for rural area because immigration often stop in big cities like Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, and it's getting more difficult to attract people in outside those big cities. But in general, it's an issue that is going to be everywhere.
But about immigration, we see in Quebec some companies doing themselves the effort. They have targeted certain immigrants, and they have programs, and it works very well. So they have decided they're not waiting for any help from the government, and they have decided to do it by themselves.
Yeah.
So we see some of them in the region of Sherbrooke. So it seems like some entrepreneurs are just saying, well, I have to take it strongly and do something about this
definitely, and it's working.
You have to be creative.
In every, I saw that in many parts of the country where the city was helping also the employers. They were mission to recruit people outside the country. They bring back people with the right skills.
Because they go to the employers and say, what are your needs? And then they go abroad and try to find something that fit the needs of their employers.
Exactly. So this is a great solution. However, it takes time. It takes,
it's not a short-term answer.
No, clients told me that it could take a year before you have actually the person working.
Now, the last question, that's a difficult one. Can we talk about winners and losers in terms of the economic sectors? I don't like to talk about winners and losers. These are people. So I feel bad about that, but is it really a sector thing or a company thing?
Well, it's both. You know, because of the pandemic, some sectors were more affected, like everything related to tourism, including restaurants, they were really impacted. Some sectors really benefited from that. Technology sector, for example, because it's booming. But you're right, you know, it's not only a question of sector, it's also a question of companies. Companies who are investing in technology, they are finding the right solution for them for the shortage of labor. They are going to continue to perform better. So you can perform well in every sector of the economy. You have to be efficient, you have to invest in technology, you have to invest, and you are going to do better than the other companies in your sector.
Well, that was our last question. Thank you so much, Pierre.
Thank you,
I hope, participants, you all got some value from this webinar with Pierre. Last word, any final thoughts, advice for our participants?
Well, you know, something I want to say, we were, you know, as economists, we look at the economy and we try to figure out where the economy is going. We were extremely impressed by entrepreneurs over the last 2 years. You know, the situation has been very difficult at the beginning. It's improving now, but people have been very resilient. We saw people changing their business model, investing massively in technology to be able to increase their presence online because they saw that people couldn't go to stores. So a lot of entrepreneurs did very well, or they are doing better because they were very resilient. So we should be very proud of that. And the good news is the economy is improving. We're not done yet. We still have issues related to COVID-19, but the economy is really improving, and the next 2 years are going to be quite positive.
Now, I invite you to visit BDC's website to look out for more events this week. In addition, you can also download the latest study called How to Adapt to the Labor Shortage Situation on the homepage at bdc.ca or in the resource list on your screen to have more insight on all the matters that we touched today with Pierre. Thank you very much, Pierre, for your time. And thank you, everyone, for your time and participation, and have a great day.